Kia ora everyone. We've elected to shoot this item out at the Whirinaki and Esk Water Treatment Plant in the Esk Valley, which is where we are now. Prior to Cyclone Gabrielle hitting New Zealand, the team had been tracking the system for approximately 10 days. Hawke's Bay had already been subject to two significant weather events since January 1st, both of which had placed our stormwater and wastewater networks under pressure, but within manageable thresholds. While we did not foresee the scale and intensity of Cyclone Gabrielle, the recent experience of the previous two events did mean we had our eye in, so to speak. The Three Waters team and Council's maintenance contractor, Fulton Hogan, and some subcontractors has a wet weather event plan that, when activated, initiates a higher level of preparedness to help the stormwater and wastewater networks and teams cope with deluges. Our Three Waters infrastructure, and this is the same for most other types of infrastructure, is typically built to specified design levels, whether that be to withstand weather events to a specified return period, earthquakes of a specified magnitude, heat to a specified temperature, etc. When these design levels are exceeded, the infrastructure is either often damaged or overwhelmed, and often with wider consequence. Activating the plan comes at a financial cost, so judgment is required and forecast triggers are used to assist with decision making. At the time of Gabrielle, forecast triggers were set to rainfall exceedances of 20 millimetres in an hour period or 50 mil over a 24-hour period. If either of those are met, then the plan is activated. The unpredictable nature of recent weather events, with rainfall typically exceeding forecast, did add another layer of consideration to decision making. Implementing the plan sees additional plant and resources secured, network checks completed. This includes checking pump stations, wastewater treatment plant, known network problem areas, additional checks of generators, securing portaloos should wastewater service be lost in our urban networks, securing sucker trucks, securing additional maintenance staff. This is where the additional cost comes in, as these resources are secured in anticipation of an event. Activation of the plan also sees a command centre set up at the maintenance contractor's office in Whakatū. This is staffed by both Fulton Hogan and HDC staff to enable 24-hour response to an event as best as possible. With Cyclone Gabrielle, staff activated the wet weather event plan 4 p.m. Friday 10th of February. Rosters were established Sunday 12th February and a command post at Whakatū established Monday 13th February. The event was monitored and responded to around the clock. Initial focus was to ensure wastewater and stormwater pumping stations, wastewater treatment plant continued to operate. Both Fulton Hogan and HDC Three Waters staff were out and about across Hastings and Havelock North networks throughout the night and following day. Work involved directing sucker trucks deploying and redeploying generators to the most critically impacted pump stations. During the early hours of the morning, pump stations progressively became overwhelmed, reaching a point where control is lost either through loss of power or where pumping capacity is insufficient to cope with the inflow of waste or stormwater. Staff became aware of flooding in certain parts of Havelock North, such as St Hall Lane and Upton Street, in the early hours of Tuesday morning. However, we did not become aware of the extent of flooding until daylight, and that includes the Joel Road area in Havelock North. Conditions for the teams responding at night could best be described as treacherous. Additionally, Tiawonga suffered flooding in part due to stormwater infrastructure associated with the Tiawonga dams being overwhelmed, as well as a manhole cover failure. In the late 70s, early 80s, detention facilities were constructed in the Havelock North stream catchments after a significant storm event in the early 70s. These facilities performed as they should, and while unfortunately quite a number of properties did suffer extensive storm damage in Havelock North, particularly in the Joel Road and Plassey Street areas, teams were deployed immediately after the event to assess damage to the various Three Water networks and cleaning up of debris started immediately where access permitted, particularly in the Hastings and Havelock North area. For the most part, the Hastings and Havelock North urban wastewater and stormwater networks were recovered and service restored over a period of 3 to 4 days following the event. This was as power supply was restored via generator and mains and surface floodwaters drained away and receded. Overall, these networks coped as well as could have been expected given the size and scale of this event, and the early activation of the wet weather event plan certainly aided the response. Under the operation of the operations team, the wastewater treatment plant at East Clive performed well. It was running at near capacity but did cope. It ran on standby generator for several weeks until power was restored. Over this time, it consumed thousands of litres of diesel, but worth every drop to keep this critical facility running. As with many, Three Waters' initial assessment and response throughout the Wairoa district was hampered by limited communication and access. It took several days and a helicopter flight to get a clear understanding of the extent and severity of damage sustained across the wider Three Waters network, and particularly drinking water. With regard to our public drinking water supplies, the Whirinaki and Esk drinking water treatment plant was the hardest hit, suffering extensive damage, which is not surprising being located in the Esk Valley, one of the hardest hit areas. The plant was inoperable for a number of weeks, and it is a credit to the operations team who very quickly put together a plan and resource to excavate the plant and bore headworks from the muck, locate and repair broken pipes, and get an interim water supply up and running. Tipohui also suffered extensive damage to its raw water main, and the community worked with staff to get that supply back into production. The water safety and resilience improvements to the Hastings drinking water supply network was tested during this disaster and paid dividend with regard to both water storage and backup power supply. Water storage maintained supply for periods at Waipatiki, Waimarama, Tipohui and Esk Whirinaki. And while the Whirinaki plant was severely damaged, the other recently constructed plants stood up well to the event. Overall, cyclone damage to the Three Water network is presently estimated at approximately $6.5 million. This is approximate, and how and where the Whirinaki Esk water treatment plant is rebuilt will influence this figure, as will the extent of repairing services across in and around the Havelock North Stream and catchments. These are the areas that will form the bulk of the Three Waters recovery work going forward. Three Water recovery is in the resourcing and planning phase presently, and it is probably a 2 to 3 year journey to fully rebuild the broken bits. Investigating and evaluating and implementing the lessons learned from the cyclone, while already being implemented in some instances, will be an ongoing journey for quite some time. In closing, while there is nothing fun about experiencing a disaster, on reflection, there have been some positives. In terms of testing infrastructure, what worked well, i.e. permanent generators comes to mind, response plans, and what requires improvement. The standout reflections for me relate to people. Firstly, our communities and the many examples of resilient communities and the togetherness that comes through living through a disaster. And next, our organisation, the many teams that did the mahi, and of course I'm biased, but our exceptional Three Waters team, everyone stepped up to the plate, and it's a privilege to be part of this organisation and our community. Kia kaha, te mātou mea.